of all beings in the process of reproduction and recreation. And by the way, this is something that is mentioned several times in the book of Genesis. A living being will be productive of those elements which recreate that living being. And this applies to grass and to trees and to fruits and to fish and to birds and to men and women. That is, within the living being, you have that which recreates a reasonably accurate facsimile, not exact, but a reasonably accurate facsimile of the same being. And when, let's say, the story is told, the first child is born, the description is like himself, in his form, in his image, namely a reproduction of the living being. And this takes place in all cases of living beings. Now, of all those who have to give birth, and of all the female counterparts of any living being that give birth, there is only one that suffers pain and agony in the process of giving birth. And you know who that is. It's the woman, the female of the human species. No other living being goes through that process, goes through the pain and suffering of giving birth. You've seen pictures of a buffalo giving birth. A child drops out and struggles and stands up on its feet. It's ready to milk, it's ready to suck. A cow, a horse, any animal. The only one that has pain and suffering is the human being, namely the woman. Why? Because we are smart. That is, we have intelligence, superior intelligence, a big brain, and the brain of the human being is substantially larger than the brain of any other comparable being. I mean, you can take big animals like whales and elephants. Oh, they have big brains, but proportionately and comparatively. And this big brain, namely, the element of our being where we feel that the intelligence operates, requires a substantial covering, the cranium. And it so happens that the human being is so large, proportionately, that the head of the baby is just a little too large for the birth canal. Well, how did that happen? And why are we neotenists, as the biologists would say? We are born unfinished. When we're born, we still have a lot of things to do before we become capable of standing, and later on of thinking and of talking and so on. The point is, we are unfinished, because we couldn't be finished. If we were finished in the womb, we'd never be born, and that's it. We are unfinished so that we can come out, and then the process of growth continues. But we are born with a brain, a head, which is too big for the birth canal. Namely, because we are intelligent, we suffer that. And you know, it's interesting the way it's put there, you know, when God says to the woman, now that you're smart and you acquire this intelligence, you're going to suffer for it. It's that observation. And by the way, I noticed that scientists recently have come to the conclusion that this phenomenon was actually mentioned in the biblical text. I mean, just recently, some have published in their articles saying the Bible talks about this, namely, why do we have this condition, this unique condition? Because we are intelligent, and therefore the brain is larger, and the head is larger, and the biblical writer took notice of it, but put it in the context of, that's your punishment. You wanted to be smart? Now you've got it. You want to be intelligent? Now you know. Every animal struggles in order to eat, in order to survive, and also drops dead. But we have this power of thinking and imagination and looking into the future, and we say, oh my God, Now I'm alive, but all of a sudden I feel a little pain, a little this, a little indigestion. Could it be indigestion or could it be a heart attack? I don't know. The point is we are aware and conscious, and this creates this dilemma of being alive and intelligent and human and aware and in a physical context which ultimately wears down and falls apart. Of course, you know, they're doing nice things now, because I read now and I see so many people are living to the age of 90 and 100 and so on. We're extending lifespan. Who knows, they may get up to the lifespans that some of these people in the Bible had. But in any event, the human being, everything is finite in time. Now, let's start with the cosmology and see in what way it is a polemic or differs from other cosmologies. So let's get to the problem of cosmology. How did the universe come into being? Or what is it that put it in its place? And the problem is still being debated. There is a dominant theory of cosmology today, which is called the Big Bang, because astronomers have a sense of humor also. So the Big Bang meaning the primary phenomenon of expansion of all the original energy or material out of which the whole universe emerged. And that's been discovered only recently, because now they see that the universe is expanding, the galaxies are flying away from each other, and therefore, if they are expanding, the universe is larger today than it was yesterday, larger than it was an hour ago, larger today than it was a year ago, much larger today than 100 years ago or 1,000. Let's go back 1,000,000. It arose, if it's expanding, it must have come out of a smaller context. And so you push back until you get to the point where you say, well, the whole universe was once one particular something, call it a primeval ball of energy, which for a certain reason began to expand, and then the universe came into being. That's a theory of cosmology, modern theory of cosmology. Most astronomers believe in that, and the evidence seems to support them. I say seems to support them because there's still another way of interpreting the evidence. I know one of my favorite books was the book Frontiers of Astronomy by Fred Hoyle, which is just a beautiful explanation of astronomy. But Fred Hoyle there presents a theory of cosmology which was created by two young men who were sitting in a British prison, not because they were criminals, but because they were German citizens who went to England as the Nazis took over. But because they were German citizens, they were enemy aliens, obviously, even though they were quite happy to be in England. So they were in an internment camp, and these two guys got together. They were young fellows, and they began to talk about, and they came up with an interesting theory, which they called the steady state. And the steady state theory is beautiful. And not only that, presents an alternative cosmology. But the Big Bang guys feel that they have the evidence on their side. But still, it's interesting, because when I spoke to one of these men, and I said, look, the Big Bang, they say that it's the Big Bang. He says, look, you know, it's not that certain yet. We still are debating the issue. But it shows that there are logical considerations on what is the nature of the creation of the universe and how did it come into being. Well, let's look back and see how people dealt with that problem.